You hanging out with us today, Miss P?
No, just to monitor the
Oh, I was going to say, I'll put you on now. Hello, and welcome to Beyond the Noise, where we try to get past all the surface rhetoric and the, go hard or go home and just continue to work. But when we actually try to explain what it means and what we're talking about in detail. For the first time in 27 episodes, I do not have the round-faced Mexican girl in attendance. It is not because she doesn't want to be here. She's out there saving the whales, and she's out there wrestling and fighting against evil, and she's called 7 times, wild in the battle amidst all of the headache, and now she is fixing those whales and getting all the oil off those turtles that she's been out there saving. So we're going to miss the round-faced Mexican girl today. However, I have an amazing guest in studio, a big friend of mine, a mentor of mine, coached me at TCU. He was a strength coach at TCU from Pennsylvania. He graduated as a Red Raider, not with 1 degree, but with 2 degrees. He is one of the best strength and conditioning coaches that I have ever seen. He has coached all athletes, all sports, all ages, but more than that, he is amazing to all that he encounters. And one thing that we love about him and respect the most about him is that while we were in college, Coach Pollard treated us like men. The respect was there and it was prominent. He demanded it because he gave it. And today we're going to learn a lot about how to communicate with athletes. I have with me 60 years young Coach Ben Pollard. Coach, how we doing?
Man, I'm doing great. I'm fired up as heck. This is my first time to be on a podcast, and I can't think of a better host than you.
Man, I sure appreciate it. Coach, you remember when I first started this thing out, before I met Kenny and before I met Miss P, we were doing those backyard podcasts in the back office with the terrible lighting and doing the best we can, but the information we couldn't deny. Coach, you're still helping athletes. Tell us a little bit about how you got into strength coaching and how you came from Lubbock to Sam to small town this to big time Power 5 football out of TCU into Alabama into A&M, and why do you keep doing it? I asked a lot, but let's start over.
All right.
Coach, tell us how you became a strength coach.
Okay, truthfully, so I played played high school football, played high school baseball. I'm a baseball player at heart.
Oh yeah,
but
me too.
I was very involved with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes when I was in school, in high school, and then in college. Mm-hmm. And so a bunch of the football guys that were my friends that I got to hang out with, I wanted to go lift weights with them.
Okay.
Right? I wanted to work out with them. I loved that part of it. I just didn't have the talent to play. So a guy named Mike Mock was the head strength coach at Texas Tech. Mike's a former Red Raider player, played in the NFL, middle linebacker, great player. So he was the head strength coach. And so I asked him, hey, how can I come in here and work out with my buds? And he said, no problem. You just get to clean up the weight room and lock the door, bring me the key.
So you shut it down.
So I shut it down. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So my introduction into strength and conditioning, so to speak, because we really didn't lift weights in the 70s in high school. We really did not. Was there at Texas Tech in the old corner of the stadium weight room, which wasn't much, but it was fun. It was great to hang around with football players. And it was great to be part of the training. So it built in me that desire to be a strength coach.
So I got a question about that, because we're talking generationally now, because I didn't start lifting weights until I was in the 8th grade. And any testosterone filled boy, the moment he starts lifting weights, shirts come off every chance you get. I mean, there's never a shirt being worn, and if it is, it's a half shirt or a muscle shirt or whatever. So, my introduction to weight training was 8th grade, but it was do these lifts. I really didn't learn anything until, and it's not a knock, it was just we weren't really taught anything until we got to college. And I had Coach Wainwright there the first year, and then you for those 3 years. So I'm going to pull back. when you say your introduction to weightlifting, weight training came in college, it's just because you wanted to get bigger and you wanted to hang out with your friends, or was it something that you were drawn to and decided you might want to develop?
Yeah, when I was in high school, we lifted. The only thing we did was like bench press and shrugs off this thing called a Marcy machine that was built into the wall. They ran us like dogs. Now we did mat drills and wrestling and that, but we really didn't do what I'd call training in terms of weightlifting. Nautilus, the original Nautilus was in vogue at that time, and guys would go down to a Nautilus gym and do the one set to failure kind of Nautilus stuff, which definitely worked for building muscle mass, especially if you're talking about a 16, 17, 18-year-old. It was effective.
Help the audience understand when you talk about Nautilus and the machines, because I know what you're talking about. It's so funny, but give them a comparison of what Nautilus would be in comparison today.
Hammer strength
there you go.
and they use different machines now because they're plate loaded or leveraged. They had a whole system using chain driven and a very precise program. The machines were good. I guarantee you, I'd love to have all them old dark blue Nautilus pieces.
No doubt.
When we went to TCU, my first time as a GA, they still had all the Nautilus equipment in the old weight room.
Had it in the back corner.
And it works. It was good stuff. A Nautilus shrug machine could get your shoulders
get
jacked
you right on together.
Yeah. But research found later that doing multiple sets of an exercise was more effective, especially when we're talking about developing large quantity muscle mass. So the one set to failure did work, and it worked for it would be good for older people to this day, but most of them probably wouldn't be willing to push themselves
to max.
Because usually they wanted you to throw up before you left.
You go to max.
Yeah, go to max, throw up. Your lactic acid level was so high in your bloodstream that it usually made you a little, if you weren't at least queasy, then you didn't go very hard.
What'd you get your degrees in, Coach?
My undergrad degree is in home economics. Okay, now, go this way.
You just made my day.
Yes, so originally I was going to go into ministry. I was going to be a pastor or a counselor. And so there were two angles you could take. You could go psychology, or you could go social work. Well, social work fell under home economics at Texas Tech at that time. And I did not want to be a psychology major. I wanted to take counseling classes and those things. That was more in line with what I wanted to do. So I had my undergrad degree in home economics. I went to school with a lot of women. And it was pretty fun, by the way, in case you're wondering.
Side note, I understand what you mean. I was an education major.
Yes.
And it was young education, so a lot of classes, probably like 80% of them, I was the only dude. So group projects were the best thing that ever happened to me. But continue.
Amen. And you didn't skip class.
I never missed class.
I never
Why would I not go to class?
I was in charge of the hugging ministry at the college. You
wanted to make sure everybody felt
So, and then I went and I came to Dallas. I worked in the mid 80s for a company called Briggs Weaver. I got a job. The economy was bad. I needed to go to work. A friend of mine helped me get this job, and it was me in a cubicle, which I'm not very good in a cubicle. I don't sit still very well. You know me. You know me better than that. And so I began looking. I worked out like crazy. I worked out at this old gym at Ferguson and Gus Thomason in East Dallas. And man, there were some steroid-loaded dudes at this gym. This was like guys with 100 pounds between their legs doing pull-ups, and there were some dudes. And it just spurred that on for me to want to be a strength coach. I looked into North Texas and then going back to Lubbock. And Lubbock was a cheap place to live. Lubbock's a cheap, for me, plus I had community already there. So I went back and got my graduate degree in exercise science. And I became a graduate assistant for a guy named Joe Jurassic, who was the Cowboy strength coach for 15 years.
He was like the 15 years.
Yep. Survived 5 coaching changes. And the rest is history, as it were. And Joe was a great mentor and a great boss, and nobody to be reckoned with. I mean, the dude didn't put up with nothing. I was late one time in 2 years. I was 7 minutes late, which that meant I was there at...
You was 20 minutes late.
Well, yeah, kind of. I got there at 5:52 instead of 5:45 for the 6 o'clock, and he didn't talk to me for 2 weeks, and so I knew
you knew what that meant.
Screwed up, but yeah. And Joe was a great coach, and I mean, you think about the teams he got to coach.
Yes, indeed.
With the Cowboys and watching I got to watch Larry Allen squat one day, and that was an amazing feat. Just watching some of those old dudes, and it was fun.
I can tell you still get the excitement just even thinking about it. It's an exciting deal.
You know, one of the things Joe made us all do is whoever we coached, we had to not lift with, but we had to run with. So say that I had the mid-skill guys, like the linebackers and DNs and running backs. That meant whatever they ran, I was running with them.
Do you think that was about camaraderie, or was it about showing them? What do you think that was about?
That was about commitment. That, hey, I'm not asking you to do something
that I haven't done, or
that I am not willing to do, don't know what it feels like. You know, so as an older coach, I had to pick the O-lineman later.
Right.
And I probably stopped running when I was about 44, 45 with groups. I could still run with some. I started falling apart a little bit, but I knew what a 400 felt like. I knew what I knew, so that when I'm prescribing exercise, I'm not pulling it out of thin air.
Say that so everybody understands because that is what I want to talk about. Today we have Coach Ben Pollard, widely respected across the strength training nation. I want people to understand the statement that he just made. When you're doing what with exercise?
Prescribing it.
So
like
you're not
a doctor prescribes medicine.
Exactly. So you're not just randomly picking exercises because they sound cool.
No.
Help me understand, or help our viewers understand the importance of not prescribing exercise, but what you were learning as a young strength coach. Because later I'm going to talk about what you know now as a veteran strength coach. So as you were coming up, what were you learning? What were you taking away from the game?
Well, and we did lift too. So Jurassic, we all lifted together as coaches, and
Why?
Again, we were in the
experience. Yes. Okay.
And so I lifted. At Sam Houston for almost 10 years. I also taught 3 weight training classes.
Right. So you had to lift 2 at the time.
Yes. So I got to, but one of the things, what does it feel like to have 400 pounds on your back? What does it feel like to catch 275 in a front squat?
From the front squat to the flip position.
And not that I was as strong as cats, but I got to know what, and what is a 400? Yeah. What does a repeat 400 look like? Or what does running 24 110s feel like?
Tempo?
Yes. What's it feel like to, and what are those, so I'm thankful for that part of it, because never did I prescribe something that I had not at least experienced. I was really good at circuit training. My guys would tell me, but I did that same circuit training. I was a lower upper, and I knew what they were. So just experiencing those things rather than just prescribing them without understanding them makes it better.
Just in case you guys are thinking, the initial thought of, there's no way he did all of those exercises in all 3 groups. You're absolutely right. Because as when you're dealing with athletes, coach, and tell me if I'm wrong, in the first group, we're going to pick a few of these exercises and make sure we can get to the second group. By the end of the third one, we've completed all of the work, and everybody knows that we have an understanding of how it works. It's so funny you say that, coach, because I said today to an athlete, I said, listen, man, I'm never going to ask you to do something I have not done or will not do. Not because I want you to feel like I know, like how I want you to understand that I understand what you're going through. I know what you're dealing. I know you're tired. I know you're coming out of class. I know this hour may be brutal, but I also know what happens when we get through it.
Yes.
So as you were coming up, what was your first job out of your GA, coming out of Texas Tech, you have your exercise science degree. What was your first gig?
I became the head strength coach July 21st, 1989 at Sam Houston State. So again, that involved me with all 15 sports.
Wow.
But only 2 sports lifted weights in the weight room, volleyball and football. And that was because nobody liked the guy in front of me. So my job was to help people understand that everybody benefits from weight training, regardless of what you do. If the prescription is right, everybody benefits. And so by the time I got through my second year, I had every sport. I had some great track people. I trained basketball. One of my former Sam Houston basketball guys is the head basketball coach at Irving Nimitz. So I see him, and it's so fun to see former athletes. And in your situation, just like how nice you were talking about that, to also know that I treated them properly so that I could walk in the room and have a great conversation with them.
Absolutely.
It's huge to me.
That's everything.
It's huge to me. In this day, and I'm skipping ahead.
Well, let's stay right here. This is important. Yeah.
With what's going on, and like what went on at Iowa is. I actually called. I didn't call you, did I?
You did.
I might have called you. I called some people and said, did I ever come across as a racist while I was coaching?
I called you and we talked about that.
Okay.
So let's let the people understand what we're talking about. At the beginning of before the season started, the Iowa strength coach had been accused by multiple players over multiple years of basically being a detriment to the culture and making minority athletes feel exactly that, minority and oppressed in the way he talked to them and the way he acted towards them. And what that thing told me was, number one, whether he did or didn't do it, the accusation over time tells me there's no real respect for the way he treated people, so he wasn't really respected. The second part is that feeling of holding your power over people's head, it doesn't bring out the best in the athlete. So before I ask the question, I'm going to tell a story. And I know you know what I'm talking about. I was in college, baby, so I don't feel bad about this. Yes. Me, and to protect the names of the innocent, let's just say Jed, Fred, and Ted.
I didn't know anybody was innocent.
Was hanging out with me on a Thursday night. And we had early morning, 6 o'clock, Fridays. That the workout lasted, 45 minutes, coach? We had to be explosive on the power, clean a few auxiliary lifts when we get out of there. So me, Jed, Ted, and Fred, we all show up at like 6:15. We kind of knew what it was going to be. But this is what I learned from Coach Paul. He didn't put us on blast. He didn't make us feel little. He just made sure we understood that we have to do what's necessary to be a part of what we're doing. So you walked up to us on the platform. You guys can't be in here. You guys got to go. You guys weren't here when it was time to be here. You can't start with this group. You need to leave. And I'm sitting there looking sad, and I couldn't argue. But I felt treated with respect, and I understood where I was wrong. And this was the first time nobody told me I should apologize. So we all came back, hey, Coach, look, we understand. We totally apologize. We're going to make it right. Never again were any of us late for anything, and we always tried to be the example. You could have went the other way and we'd have been in there arguing and whatnot. Why did you treat people with that kind of activity and didn't flex your authority when we see it all over the place? What is it about your personality that you knew that would go further than embarrassment or trying to check somebody to flex your muscle?
Well, first of all, I was raised in a military home, so I did what my dad asked me to do. My dad was a master sergeant, and but even that, he didn't lord his authority over me. And then, part of that is, my deep-seated Christian faith is a part of that. And, the ultimate example of treating people properly is Jesus Christ. And so I don't ever want to veer from that. And then I really respect athletes. Y'all I'm asking you to do things that I'm not capable of, and I don't mean workout wise, but then you get to perform things that I wish I could do that.
Wow.
I wish that I had that ability to go do that. How cool is it that I get to help you maximize that ability in the time? So if I'm creating an adversarial role, then because I'm here for you, if you know that I'm that person that's here to help you reach your goal, you fully trust me.
Yes.
Then the buy-in it isn't a buy-in. It's just us.
It's us doing what we came to do.
We are all on the same train, because if I don't help you, then I'm gone anyway. So let's all stay on the same train. And you know, you as a player and me as a coach with Coach Fran, we better be on the same train.
We have to be on the same train, or else we're going to get rolled over on the track.
Yeah.
So, but
because he was an equal opportunity ass reaper, so it really didn't matter.
It didn't matter how old you were, how young you were, how tall you were, how short. It didn't matter. Everybody could get it.
Yes, sir.
But even with that, so I'm gonna take a step back, because you said earlier, you said that you were gonna go into ministry.
Yeah.
But ministry is a far cry from strength training, because you're full of testosterone, it's aggressive, it's loud, it's rap music, it's this music, it's this attitude, and you have to flex some kind of authority over, bigger, stronger, faster egos, basically. I know. Do you feel like your passion for the ministry and your love in Christianity propelled you through these strength training ranks, and that allowed you to coach at A&M, TCU, Alabama, and these bigger programs, but bring the same kind of attitude and energy to smaller programs? But how did you tie those together?
I'll say this: I am thankful for the 9+ years I had at Sam State, because I developed my own program, and nobody really looked over my shoulder and said, I really had time to expand. Plus, I was teaching a class. I taught a class for kines majors that was almost all kids going into coaching. Almost all of them were going to be coaches. And so it was really me always thinking about what makes a good coach, what things you need to be doing besides knowing the science of it. How do I do that? Joe was a good model. He didn't put up with much. He was also one of the toughest dudes in the room, and that's why people respected him, and he was willing to do that. And so because we were more willing to be in the mix,
part of everything.
And then the spiritual part and the military family part, I was in a home that my parents were poor Western Pennsylvania workers. They grew up, their family was coal miners and steel workers. I didn't see the racial part.
Right. Okay.
So even growing up, my dad was in Vietnam. Went to Vietnam as a volunteer So when I was 8 and 9 years old in '68, '69, when there was a lot of racial divide, I saw war protesters. I didn't see the race
protest. Yeah.
Why are they mad at my dad, or why? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so that wasn't part of my upbringing. There were good soldiers and bad soldiers. There were no black soldiers and white soldiers.
Right.
It was you were a good soldier or a bad soldier.
And so you went into that, and you didn't have a cultural divide. You just decided to find out about this person, not this person of color or this person that's white. You wanted to understand the person to make the team better.
Yes. Now, believe me, I had to overcome some things like, earrings.
Yeah.
Like my dad would have shot me to death.
Yeah.
I would have been. How about tattoos? Yeah. My dad was a career military man with no tattoos. If I ever see you writing on your arm, how about dreads?
Yeah.
So I had to determine that earring wasn't a statement like, I don't like weight. I'm going to be.
I'm against the grain. This is just who I am.
No.
Yeah.
I had to learn that you cannot judge. And it took time. I'm not going to say that that's an easy lesson to say, okay, man, he got tattoos and he got earrings, and you got to know the character of people.
Yeah.
I've had more African American black athletes call me on Father's Day through the course of my life than I have had white former players call me on Father's Day.
Why do you think that is?
Because I treated them right.
Treated like me.
I just, but and even more so is I have, 3 kids of my own, have 2 sons of my own, both who played college athletics. And as I got older, I'm thinking, I wouldn't want that dude coaching my son. So I'm coaching everybody else's son. I better be doing it well because they got a mama. Because you know me.
Yeah.
I remember I used to go find parents.
Yes, you did. Yep.
And I'd say to parents, I said, dang, you did a good job.
Yep.
Because you don't raise a great kid accidentally. There's purpose in it. And so I always hugged moms. And that's, I'll tell you what I miss as much as anything. First time I went to a game after I retired, I went to the UT Cal game because Tom Riddle was coaching at Cal when Cal won that game.
Shout out to Coach Tom Riddle, Mark.
Mark
one of the greatest pregame speakers in the history of the world.
And just a great human being
dude,
who treats everybody well. But I went to see him, where all the players come out and coaches come out. And man, all that hugging mamas and oh man, I was sad. I don't get to do
that. Part of that no more.
Because that's the family part of college football that's irreplaceable.
Exactly.
It's a wonderful, because you don't see that. I keep bumping the table. Probably that's why it's doing it.
There we go.
You don't see that down there. That racial divide. Right. But these are our boys.
Our people. Yeah.
These are our people.
Yep.
And it doesn't come across that way. So that college football is awesome that way.
You want to know what's funny? Every former athlete, people I played with or played against, or people, that is always the commonality. We don't really miss the game. I don't miss anything about practice at all. Getting dressed to leave
football practice sucks. And it sucked even for a strength coach.
Here's the truth. There are only 2 fun parts of practice: one-on-ones and team. Yeah. And they are no longer than 15 minutes. So out of those 3 hours, I have fun for 15 minutes. Nobody likes football practice. I don't care what anybody says. So going forward, I'm here with Coach Ben Pollard. He is talking to us about basically how we treat athletes. So let's talk about the communication. We're watching in today's world where athletes are doing the things that we didn't do. They have a voice. They're not just shutting up and following instructions. It's bigger than that. They see the picture the way it is. They are students, which means they have to be a part of life, and then they're athletes. How does it make you feel when people my age, and your age, and these 2 generations are all the things they taught us? Stand up for yourself, be proud, have a voice, take up for your teammate or your friend. We're the same ones pointing fingers, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about, just go play. How does that make you feel? First, the voice of the athlete, and then how does it make you feel to hear the fan or the outside noise and what they're saying? What do you think about those 2 dynamics?
Well, first of all, if you're outside, you don't know what you don't know.
There you go.
To start with. And how people feel and how teammates can treat one another and how they do things. I guess I'm a young coach when I go to Sam Houston. I'm 27. I'm a head strength coach all of a sudden, making $26,000 a year, by the way.
And what you guys think about? I'm a head strength coach making
$26,000 a year and teaching 4 classes a semester. So, you did
it because you loved it, though.
One of the things when you walk in that situation, you got a group of seniors and juniors, probably upperclassmen, that are loyal to the guy that was here before me, that left. So his program totally different than my program. His demeanor, he was at Sam, the guy was a world-class power lifter. He was the strongest dude in the room. And so he used to tell them, until you become the strongest dude in the room, nobody sits down, nobody.
Right.
Well, I ain't the strongest dude in the room, so I got to figure this out. I've got to win people through trying to gain relationship with them as best I can. I don't know that I ever saw myself as an authority figure. Like, hey, I worked for a head coach, and the more power I got from that head coach, because part of it, you knew, like at TCU with Fran, is he put such an emphasis on it.
And you got to be bigger, you got to be stronger.
I mean, and so you knew
it's always in your
there was a little bite back there that you had to deal with. And for most part, everybody was that way. All the coaches that I worked for were that way, but some were just better than others. You know, Coach Kroom was probably the easiest because there was a balance. Yeah, at Mississippi State with Coach Kroom and I, and how I treated kids and how he treated. But because I'd never been around anybody that could speak to young black athletes the way Sylvester Kroom could.
Absolutely.
I mean, he called them out, and I'm going, this dude lived through it, because he really did live through it.
Were you there when Coach Melvin Smith was there with
you
too?
Oh, yeah, Melvin. Because
Shout out to Coach Melvin Smith.
Yeah, Melvin got me that job,
that dude
truthfully.
awesome.
Yes. And Charlie Harbison was there.
Yeah, I know,
So I was actually a minority on that staff. Ellis Johnson and I, Joe Judge, the head coach of the Giants. Was our GA at that time. So we had great people, but I was a minority. There was 8 or 9.
7, 8 black
coaches and 2 or 3. Rocky Felker and I and Ellis were the only white full-time coaches, I think, on that staff. So, but I never thought a thing about that. Coach Kroom treated people with ultimate respect. He was just a super human being, still is. But just trying to develop that. First of all, as a young coach, you're trying to develop your system. And so I'd go over to A&M and watch Mike Clark, longtime successful strength coach at A&M, or go watch Rob Rogers at Baylor. And those guys, they treated people well. I remember the first time walking in with Mike, he invited me over. That's when Marcus Buckley played, and they had that was the true, what did they call their defense? What was that?
That was one.
Wrecking Crew.
The Wrecking Crew.
No, they were real. No,
this
this was the group that everybody on defense ran a sub-5 and all that. And those guys treated me with respect. I was the shortest dude in the room, and I'm shaking hands. And those guys were genuinely invited me in. And Coach Clark never raised his voice. He was just, here's what we're doing, you know. And he treated people that way. So that he was another positive role model for me, in that, man, me barking at you is not gonna help me. I remember one time Michael Bennett, when I met Bennett. Michael Bennett stood up and started coming against me on some and it was I wasn't barking, I was just, and Red Bryant stepped up in front and said, Michael, shut, and I won't say it exactly, get in line and do what you're supposed to. So one of the things, and you know this, so Michael Keithley and Sean Worthen were the 2 dudes I needed to be on my team.
Absolutely.
To take care of the rest.
To have an understanding of what we're trying to get accomplished.
So you find the bell cow, and you say, hey, this is where we're going. You develop that relationship with him, with them, whatever, who your leaders are, and you walk through that together. How are we going to do this?
So in that dynamic, which that is fantastic to hear and understand, because in that dynamic, it brings me back to how does it make you feel? Knowing you've been in there, I know what you're talking about now. The audience has an understanding of the conversation. How does it make you feel when all of these digital voices or these internet gorillas are pointing these fingers at these kids, or the same kids that we told to stand up for themselves and make them the bad guy for looking out for one another? And I'm not trying to be biased, but that's what it sounds like. But how does that make you feel? Well,
I think that we're putting, college athletes are under undue pressure. The new athletics is such a business. That's why guys can jump into a transfer portal, which they deserve that opportunity. If I'm a coach and I can jump at the first person that throws me $1, then the athlete should have the same right. But here's the thing about it: they're no longer. It is hard to see anybody having fun, in a certain way. We used to could have some fun, even at TCU, but now you're so monitored. Your food's more monitored than it ever was. Your study hall, The phone makes you more accessible.
So they want.
They don't have a ton of downtime.
Right. They want these kids.
They don't have much freedom.
Yeah, they want these kids to they want to take a business approach, but keep the kids in an amateur state.
Yes.
That's what it sounds like.
Right.
It's like we want to maximize the business potential and minimize the actual potential on the field.
Yeah.
And then we say, well, you get, it's the education. I had to pay for mine. Well, actually, you didn't have to because you didn't have to go to college. And then secondly, now getting out of school and being able to look back and I see that there was a lot of dollars made off the movements of many athletes.
Right.
We can't forget that. That's important, and to be able to communicate that and allow those kids to speak their voice, right, wrong, indifferent. Yeah. It gives everybody a chance to have an understanding of what's happening.
And definitely coaches need to have open dialogue. You can see the teams that do.
Yes.
Because Nick Saban, I still think Nick has dialogues with his teams, and he brings in people to speak to them to address all of those issues. Mm-hmm. And the guys that are going to be this successful at doing that are going to continue to be able to recruit
those kind of kids. Let's switch gears. I'm here with Coach Ben Paul. Let's switch gears. Let's talk the science. Let's talk about strength training. Let's talk about performance coaching and things of that nature. I want to get past some fallacies or some things people may or may not believe. I'm going to ask this question the right way. How early is too early to start strength training? How early is too early to start weight training? Or is there even a difference, Coach?
Well, you can get stronger by doing body weight exercises like push-ups and body weight squats and step-ups and lunges. And I mean, I would have young athletes. I would even have junior high and high school. If you're a soccer player, well, you got to be able to lunge walk 30 yards 3 or 4 times after practice. We don't have to take you in the weight room per se, especially if we're in a limited facility situation. So there's plenty of ways to develop strength. We even talked about isometrics for a second. Hey, get a lunge position, full lunge, not knee off the ground, knee an inch off the ground, back knee, and stay there for a minute and see if you don't get stronger. So over time, there's lots of ways. I love bands. I've become a big believer in doing a lot of band work because it gives you a lot of options, whether you're in a park or in a weight room or in your bedroom. You've got lots of ways to do that.
And it gives you resistance at the least resistant area of the lift and the most powerful area of the lift.
So it doesn't let you off the hook.
Right.
Doing a curl with a green band, and Greg knows what a green band is, is harder than doing a curl with a bar.
Or don't.
Because those have relaxed places, where the band doesn't relax on you. Yes, sir.
Central nervous system.
Yes, sir.
Of young athletes.
My favorite thing.
So let's talk about undertraining, overtraining. What's the most important thing we can do? And I want every coach, little league to any league, for athletes under the age of 12. If they just want to play, they want to be faster, they want to be stronger, let's go under the age of 10, because you can start weight training around 10, 11, 12 years old. But under the age of 10, what's the most important thing we can do for those kids?
Run around and change direction.
Just go play, right?
Yeah, just go play. Run around and play tag, play chase, play simple games, keep them in a boundary so they got to change direction, whatever, but play games. Yes. It's hard to learn how to dribble without just playing basketball.
Wow.
It's, throw the ball around. Like everybody, just because you're the biggest kid doesn't mean you shouldn't get to throw the football too. Everybody should get to throw and catch the football. Skills develop. It's kind of one of my knocks sometimes in Texas is I've seen this where a kid, he's an O lineman in junior high, so he gets to be an O lineman, and regardless of development, sometimes it's a weird deal, and so you get a really already finished product by the time they get to college. Where when I went to Alabama, this was the most stark thing is you'd watch film, and the best athlete on defense would be at a different position depending on what's going on, and And then you'd get that kid, and he'd never really lifted weights because he played every sport, and he was just, and then all of a sudden, he'd start lifting weights, and he'd gain 20 pounds, 25 pounds in the first semester.
But now they only gain 2 pounds because they've already.
They're already at a, where the athleticism and the central nervous system development is better through playing and doing movement and doing those things than it is by adding strength and conditioning or strength training per se into it.
So, which leads me to the next question. How do you feel about specialization at an early age? Like when you're teaching a kid how to do this one thing from the start. How do you feel about that?
I think what you're doing your kid an injustice.
100%.
Because he needs to experience some other things. I mean,
how long have you been a strength coach?
When did I start? 87. Since 87.
So I want everybody to listen to what a veteran in the game said. Stop forcing your kid to do this one thing until they develop the coordination, the growth, and the understanding of that skill. Now, you can teach a bunch of skills early, but don't tie a kid to this one area of one thing.
Like every little kid probably ought to play soccer.
Why is that?
Just running around chasing the ball and getting exercise and and you know, bumping into other people. You know how youth soccer is. It's 20 people chasing one ball. But
then stop and go back the other way.
But at least concepts. I remember when I was coaching at A&M College Station, the kids played flag football. So my youngest son played on a team where a bunch, like one of the girls was the point guard at Mississippi State. She was Vic Schaefer's daughter. The twins played on that team, and then Vern Banks' son, who he played at Rice. All these kids played together, and they played flag football, and it was fun as heck. Because there's one of the things I'll say, first of all, is fear is a deterrent to skill development, okay? So one of the things I knew that as a young man teaching class. So I never played baseball with anything but a tennis ball till my son was probably 7 years old. That's my oldest son, who was a left-handed pitcher and went to the Naval Academy on a football scholarship, played college baseball, finished his career playing college baseball in Georgia. I never, because if I hit him in the face with a hard baseball, baseball's done. Learning about baseball is done. So being careful about, hey, play with a Nerf football until, don't push that. Play with a soft ball. Don't allow someone to get injured unnecessarily when you have some control and it hurt by something.
Coach, I want you to repeat that statement. Fear is a deterrent to what?
Development. Athletic skill development.
I agree 100% because it doesn't allow you the opportunity to test. You can't be a chemist. You have to be right. And when you're learning, how can you be right? If you're learning, how can you know?
Right. Well, one of the things, and I think back in my own life, when I was 9, we lived in Amarillo, and they have a thing in Amarillo called Kids Inc. It's the big sports program, public sports program. And I remember I played football, and it was tackle football, which that's too early to play tackle football. Now I know that.
Okay.
And the coach used to make us get 10 yards apart.
Oh, yeah, I know.
And run and tackle each other. You stood there. You stood and let your dude tackle you. Well, that scared the dog out of me. And I played through high school. I was an offensive lineman. But
you didn't want that smoke because it wasn't right, and it's not a part of the game.
No, it's not, because people don't usually get 10-yard starts to hit.
To run a standing target.
Right, unless you're the quarterback, and maybe, but you're still not 10-yard starts. But so that fear in their mind is a definite deterrent to them developing or even wanting to continue to develop that. So be careful how you're forcing that.
Can you teach speed?
Well, and Greg, you're born fast. You can teach mechanics and improve speed.
You can improve and enhance speed.
Yes, you can.
Yes.
You can improve and enhance. You can make it more efficient, right? We talk about this.
Teach the development.
You can teach how to keep your elbows in closer, how to go through a range of motion, how to synchronize better your opposite hand and foot. And those are all things that are trainable at various, and I think that probably the critical time for some of that might be in that 13, 14, 15-year-old range. I know at the college level, it is really hard to change some habits. It's kind of hard. It's hard to change some lifting habits with college age guys if they're set into a pattern.
You're hearing this from a veteran, and I say all the time, give me an athlete at 8 years old or 8th grade, 13, 14. The reason being is that's because that's when they're the most impressionable and their body is going through the most changes.
Right.
So if I can teach you the skill and the mechanics, you don't adjust your body wrong. You adjust your body to the proper mechanics, and we can enhance speed through strength, efficiency, stability. If you fast, you fast. I want everybody to hear this because I believe this with my whole heart. Your 7-year-old is fast because he's 7.
Yeah.
That's why. Your 17-year-old is fast because he's fast.
Yes, sir.
But again, I'm gonna ask this question. Is there a difference between being fast, playing fast, and running a fast time?
I think you can train to get a fast time.
100%.
You can do the things, or guys wouldn't pay before the NFL Combine thousands of dollars
to make hundreds of thousands.
Right. So yes, you can train to become more efficient with every part of the movement. Yes. Now, if you are fast, then we need to not. Okay, Greg played with Ladanian. Ladanian's fast.
Very.
I did not screw him up in the 3 years that he was under me.
Let him be.
I didn't bother him. We had a fast team.
Yeah.
We had 8 guys that could vertical over 40 inches. We had an explosive team. So, and we tried to train that way, even though sometimes the boss wanted it a little difficult. It kind of went against what I knew to be true about certain things. If a guy can squat 2.5 times his body weight, that's enough. Now it's time to work just on power development. Certain things, and we weren't far off of that per se. I think that's the difference. Is if you're a 300-pound offensive lineman, you ought to squat 600 pounds. If you're explosive, you ought to be able to do it twice your body weight.
What are the movements that all athletes should be taught? And this is for all the coaches out there, young, old, and indifferent. What are the movements that you think young athletes should be taught as they're developing into good athletes or efficient athletes? To me, it's the pull, like above head, or the squat. They all have to learn how to squat, and then a proper athletic stance,
which is the hinge.
The hip hinge.
Okay, the greatest struggle that I have,
that we all have, Coach,
is teaching people how to hinge properly.
In your hips.
So if you can't hinge properly, you might not be able to squat properly.
Explain that so the parents and the kids understand what you mean by hinge.
Hinging is initiating movement from the hip, not the knee, which especially high school age athletes are very quad dominant because they initiate so often from the knee rather than the hip. Those athletes that are most explosive are generally better hinge athletes. And they're better squatters. So rather than when I start my squat, initiating by bending my knee forward and placing stress on my back, I'm able to actually push my knees apart, away from each other, and sit into my hip. And if you look at babies, how babies sit in a hinge, in a full squat, babies do it naturally. So we are born with the ability to do a full squat.
I found out why though.
What is that?
Those big old heads.
Keep them.
Because if they tilt forward, they're literally going to fall on their dome. So they literally sit back in their hips
to keep
the
head
head balanced. That's exactly right.
Man,
But we forget that because we don't dance. If you got rhythm and you can dance and you understand how to stand on the balls of your feet, you can play. You might not be great, but you can keep from getting hurt in a bunch of sports.
Yeah.
But the same problem I run into is the one you talk about every year, in and out, for the majority of athletes.
Yep.
It's they don't bring anything from the hips.
Right.
And that's because we use the most available muscles instead of recruiting all the muscles.
Right.
But good running backs, good point guards, good quarterbacks understand how to bring the hips to everything.
Baseball players,
Karate
pitchers,
cats, boxers, everything comes
golfers.
from the hips. Exactly. So if you're coaching up a young strength coach, how would you emphasize what he needs to teach them how to hinge?
I'd use the bands.
Okay.
So good mornings with the bands, RDLs with the bands, before I even move to a pull. Because now I can do, and I train some 13-year-old boys, and that's how because it's safe. I'm not worried about them hurting their back using a bar or barbell. I would start with the bands, and then I would start with kneeling kips. So kipping from the floor to a standing position as beginning how to do that. I would use the bands around hips from a static to learn how to push through their hips, snapping hips. And there's a lot of devices made. There's a $300 device that I got a kid that uses it that hooks all around his waist and hips and all, and it's bungees on the backside to help him, and that's fine. It's got its purpose, but it can be done with a band just as well. Simple bands. You don't have to spend $300. You can spend $50. And I would start by throwing too. Medicine ball throws, kneeling throws, where you're finishing your hips, scoop tossing, overhead tossing, balls, heavy balls is another good way to help people develop hip. I remember that Coach Anderson, who's the great sprint coach at A&M, they did a lot of backwards overhead throwing
Snap
with his sprinters. And this dude coached a lot of really...
You gotta push them hips through.
Yes, and finish hip movement. Even before the concept of of Olympic training, which I love Olympic training, but I don't believe any non-Olympic lifter needs to ever clean from the floor. I'm still opposed to cleaning from the floor.
Why is it?
And because you don't get your hips finished for the most cases.
Hang and snap.
You're a novice. You're a novice. So I prefer the box clean or from a static position or from the hang. Load and go. So you got a better chance. And truthfully, if I would have started it over, I used to be afraid originally, and I have a, you saw senior level. I was afraid of the snatch, teaching the snatch first, but I would probably teach the snatch first.
PVC starting.
Yes, because it forces you to extend your hips because you've got to move the bar a further distance.
We got a lot of people, well, whoever's listening, I guarantee they got this confused look on their face because I don't know what that means and what is that. All we're saying is bring your hips to the party.
Yes.
If we can teach people how to start with the hips and keep your feet in front, you automatically become a safer, better athlete.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead.
And maybe we do broad jump in there. We throw, but I would say if we're going to do broad jump, let's do it in the safest surface.
Yes.
So jump into sand, jump from something hard to something soft, because again, we talked about fear. We talked about the fear of landing. So if I don't want to jump that far and then land and it don't feel good. So landing into something softer, on a mat, jumping on a mat or whatever, might help that. And that way if I fall down, it doesn't hurt. And so you just got a better chance of maybe developing that skill.
What is, switching back, just talking about people, we got Coach Ben Pollard here, tremendous mentor, has been helping strength coaches and kids for 40 plus years. What would be the thing that keeps you coming back to those athletes, because they keep getting younger and or we keep getting older and they keep staying the same age is the way we look at it. What is it that keeps you going back, teaching these lessons and fighting this fight? Because we have to fight it all the time between what's right, what's different, what's new, what's wrong. You know, what keeps you in that mix?
Well, you know, even so, I've been officially, I guess, out of coaching 5.5 years, and I still step. So I'm still certified by the Collegiate Sports Group. I still maintain my certification. I still study strength and conditioning. I talk to strength coaches all the time. I have a lot of former assistants who are still head strength coaches. I love talking about it. It's like, you know, with Pollard, he's going to it's going to be Jesus or strength and conditioning that he's going to talk to you about, or maybe nutrition. We might talk about that too. Or red wine. I might throw that one in there too. Yeah. And so I love it. And the energy for me, the energy of college athletes, college students, college athletes cannot be duplicated anywhere else. It's an energy because you really are in a stage of life where you're trying to figure out who you are, who you want to be, where you're going. You're making relationships probably that are going to last a lifetime. Your college, especially if you're teammates, you're going to go to funerals together and bury friends. We experienced that.
Been there together.
You're going to go to weddings. You're going to, you know, all of these things. There's an energy that comes with that fuels me. Like, you know, when I walk into, and I'm not dogging the Cooper, I love the Cooper. The Cooper's as good a place as can be, but there's not that kind of energy.
It ain't
so I got to create
your
my
hair
own.
don't stand up on the back of your neck.
No, I got to create my own energy, and I just love, you know, because you can create the friction. You know, friction's good. We're talking about this. We need to have that conversation. Why can't we have it in the midst of my weight room? Let's have the conversation. It's kind of like the Lakers. I don't like the Lakers, and every June we'd be in training, and we're going to get into this sparring match between.
All the time.
Oh my God! Quit talking about the Lakers. And so whatever, you know.
Whatever the time.
Oh my gosh! And so that kind of energy feeds itself if it is channeled the right way. And you've got to create a culture. I'm a huge Steeler fan. I'm a huge Mike Tomlin fan.
No doubt.
And the culture of the Pittsburgh Steelers and of their locker room is a good culture. And I think there's a, you know, I like the way he does things. I remember one time he said, he was saying it was his second year he was the head coach, and it was during camp, and one of the reporters said, players say you know things are a lot better this year than last year. And Tomlin looked at him and said, I believe it's my duty to evaluate them, not for them to evaluate me. Just like that. And I said, dude, that's my duty.
And there it is.
Yes, thank you.
What would you leave? Because we're getting ready to wrap this thing up. Coach Ben Pollard has dropped some gems on us, and I think it's very important to understand how to communicate with these kids and the understanding of what the standards are in different areas. What would you leave for parents, strength coaches, and kids? Because we all are trying to get to a certain place. I don't care what anybody says. If you're a competitor, you are trying to get to a certain place or a certain level or a certain standard. And that's why it's easy for outsiders to yell, scream, and cuss if they've never done, pushed, or won anything. What would you leave athletes, coaches, parents? What advice would you leave them with as we move into a performance situation in today's times where everything is uncertain? I don't know if I'm going to play tomorrow. I don't know if I'm ever going to get to play again. I don't know if my teammates like me because I'm black, white, or indifferent. I'm finally finding out my coach is really an interesting guy at best, you know. And it's hard to coach in this environment today. You don't know the line between coaching hard or being disrespectful or trying to find the way to communicate. What would you say to all parties based on your experience and the way you treat it?
Okay. First thing I want to say is this is as a parent who had kids that played college football and grew up in that environment. Do not make your kids your idol. Do not make them your idol. Wow. Do not let them become more important than your spouse or your own well-being. Don't make them your idol, because if you're trying to live vicariously through them, you may lose the chance to have a great relationship with them to start with.
Be them.
Exactly. You know, the proverb says, "Train up a child in the way he should go," and the word is bent. That means train him up toward his bent. And if your kid's not, if he wants to play in the band and not be an athlete, let him play in the band. He's going to enjoy his life more, and you'll enjoy your life more in that long run. If there's anybody out there, anybody that thinks they can navigate all of this nonsense alone, come talk to me. Maybe you can help me.
You can help us all. Yeah.
First of all, human beings were created for community. We need each other. We need to be listening to one another. We need to help one another through this. Whatever that looks like, we should be listening, you know, slow to speak, slow to anger, quick to listen. And not, and just you evaluating yourself. Hey, where am I? Am I pushing my kid to be the quarterback because it makes me look like a great parent, or because my kid loves doing this and it's really what he wants to do, and I'm just trying to help him through some of that? Because I just, in the end, your relationship with your child, when they're adults, you want them to call you when they're 20, when they're 30. You want them to have a relationship where it's all built on trust, and they still trust you to this day with how you handled them. And no parent is perfect. Right. I screwed up so much with, and you know, hindsight being 20/20, all those kind of things. But man, the relationship with your child, and you, especially right now, folks and coaches got tough jobs. I'm around high school coaches right now in the inner city, and they got the toughest jobs. They are the frontline dudes right now. And we as adults should be agents of grace to kids. Agents of grace. We have got to be the example and agent of grace to our kids, or they're just going to be so bitter through all of this that it's just going to be hard. Life's going to be hard.
Trust and understanding pushes back resentment.
Yes, sir.
That was fantastic. I have nothing else to say. Listen, it was a treat, Coach. We really appreciate you coming by. And that's going to do it for us. I mean, usually I have something to say, but I'm excited about what we've learned. I'm excited about the opportunity. And catch us next week on Beyond the Noise. Those last words, you didn't have it on me.